Not willing to leave without the ability to bind President Trump.
No, I
right?
think that.
I mean, when it's Biden, it's okay. No. When it's Biden, oh, it's a travesty. When it's Trump in office, it's no holds barred, whatever it takes. Right?
I believe in a powerful.
What was it that President Biden's staff said? We've got to do undemocratic, unconstitutional things to save democracy. Why is this the same?
Hey everyone, you just watched that clip. And wow, this has to be one of the most intense and confrontational exchanges the Senate Judiciary Committee has seen in quite some time. Senator Josh Hawley came in laser-focused, and from the moment he began speaking, Professor Shaw was immediately put on the defensive. This wasn't your typical procedural hearing. It was sharp, direct, and politically charged, a true clash over law, ideology, and accountability. The tension in the room made it clear. This debate reflects the deep divisions shaping the country right now. Let's roll the full video, and then we'll break it down step by step, because the strategy, the framing, and the back and forth here are genuinely fascinating.
About the fact that there have been lots of rulings against the Trump administration. That's absolutely statistically true. I disagree with almost all of them. In fact, I think all of them. But the issue of this hearing really isn't the rulings, is it? It's the remedies. Would you agree? And those are distinct things. You may think that the ruling is quite correct, but that's actually not what we're talking about here today. We could have a hearing on that. Maybe we should. But we're talking today about the remedy. And the question is a remedy that binds parties who are not before the court, is that an appropriate thing? I mean, aren't you concerned about judges binding non-parties in their remedies? You may love the ruling, but even if you do, don't you think it's a little bit anomalous for courts to be going out there and binding parties who are not before them? I mean, is that something we want to encourage?
Senator, I think that judges have been issuing rulings that impact non-parties since Marbury versus Madison, right?
So you're not concerned about it?
I'm not. I absolutely think that they can be abused, and they have
wait a
been
minute. You were very concerned about it just a couple of years ago. You said in response to a nationwide injunction on the Biden FDA's mifepristone rules, and I quote, "This injunction's a travesty for principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law."
I think I've been consistent today. That was issued by Judge Kaczmarek in a single judge division. They're a problem. Those are a problem.
Him personally? Wait,
no.
Your testimony is if it's issued by Judge Kaczmarek, it's bad?
No, sir.
It's personal?
That is not my testimony.
Is the problem with the injunction? You were criticizing the universal injunction
issued by a judge in a single judge division. I've been very clear today that those are a problem.
By a Republican judge in a Republican division, then it's bad.
No, Senator.
Otherwise, it's fine.
No, Senator. I think that single judge divisions
What is the
are a problem.
principal difference? I'm looking for a principle. I understand you hate the president. I understand you love all of these rulings against him. You and I both know that's not a principle. You're a lawyer. What's the principle that divides when issuing a nationwide injunction is okay, when it's not? When the Biden administration was subject to nationwide injunctions, you said that they were travesties for the principle of democracy. You didn't say the referral to Judge Kaczmarek was a travesty. You said his injunction was a travesty for principles of democracy. So, in other words, the translation is just you didn't like the outcome. Is that right?
No, Senator. Look, we're talking about, I don't think Article 3 precludes this form of relief. So we are talking about prudential consideration.
Prudential meaning political?
No.
Then give me, so far I have yet to hear it. You've been questioned by multiple senators. I have yet to hear a principle other than the fact when you like the ruling, you think it's great to apply it nationally, including non-parties. When you don't like the ruling, it is a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law.
Look, Senator, I'll say I think I am self-aware enough to know that my view of the underlying legal question, I am sure, colors my perception of the remedy. I think that we should all acknowledge that. And yet I do think
that why shouldn't we stop nationwide injunctions for everybody?
I think
That's what we're talking about today.
Because I'm not willing to leave without relief non-parties who
No, you're not willing to leave without the ability to bind President Trump.
No, I
right?
think that...
I mean, when it's Biden, it's okay. No. When it's Biden, oh, it's a travesty. When it's Trump in office, it's no holds barred, whatever it takes, right?
I believe in a powerful...
What was it that President Biden's staff said? We've got to do undemocratic, unconstitutional things to save democracy. Why is it the same
I believe in a powerful president. I do believe in presidential power, but power and constraint are not at fundamental odds.
What is the principle? What is the principle? The legal principle. You've referenced prudence. You've referenced the judges you don't like. What's the principle of when an injunction binding non-parties, which was never done in this country before the 1960s? And let's see the chart. The Trump chart, which was done really only once Trump came into office for the first time. You don't think this is a little bit anomalous? You don't think that's a little bit strange?
A very plausible explanation, Senator, you have to consider is that he is engaged in much more lawless activity than other presidents, right?
You don't think
you must
this
concede that
was
as a
never
possibility.
used before the 1960s, and suddenly Democrat judges decide we love the nationwide injunction, and then when Biden comes to office, no, actually
It's Republican appointees as well, Senator. And the 1960s is where some scholars locate the beginning
Can
of
you
this,
identify
but
one
others.
before then?
Mila Sohoni, who's another scholar of universal injunction, suggests 1913 is actually the first. There were others in the 20s.
The Republic endured for 150 years before the nationwide injunction.
Well, the federal government was doing a lot less until 100 years ago. So there's many things that have changed in the last 100 or the last 50 years.
So long as it is a Democrat president in office, then we should have no nationwide injunctions. If it's a Republican president, then this is absolutely fine, warranted, and called for. How can our system of law survive on those principles, Professor?
I think a system in which there are
no meaningful
constraints on the president is a very dangerous system.
That's
of law,
not what you thought when Joe Biden. That is not what you thought when Joe Biden was
every
president.
You
said that is not what you said. You said it was a travesty for the principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law. You also said
the Supreme Court
agreed
with me on that.
You also said when Joe Biden was president, you said the idea that anyone would foreign shop to get a judge who would issue a nationwide injunction was just judges looking like politicians in robes. Again, it threatened the underlying legal system. People just trying to get the result they wanted. It was a travesty for the rule of law. But you're fine with all of that if it's getting the result that you want.
Sir, the Supreme Court agreed unanimously with me in that case, right? There was no standing. The case should never have been allowed to proceed.
Wait,
the combination of parties without standing and the single-judge division.
No. We're talking. No, they did not. They did not issue a ruling on the nationwide injunction. You criticized the injunction nationwide. Listen,
issued in a case where no one had standing.
Here's the thing. We've now gone 6 minutes, and Senator Kennedy had you for 6 or 7. You couldn't identify a single principled basis. We all know the truth here, which is it's not just you. It's most of my colleagues over here on this side of the aisle, who I respect a great deal, and they were raising very principled objections to the nationwide injunction just 6 months ago, maybe 9 now. And you're probably right. My point is that all that's changed in 9 months is the occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I realize that my colleagues on this side of the aisle very much dislike that individual, and I realize that you think that the rulings that he has lost are fundamentally sound. We might grant all that. I disagree with all of that, but we can put that to one side. The question we're talking about here is, should judges, single judges, district court judges, be able to bind non-parties who are not in front of them? And you used to say no, now you say yes. Let's be consistent. I would just suggest to you our system of government cannot survive if it's going to be politics all the way down.
Can I briefly respond?
Sure.
I mean, you invoked democracy a couple of times there, Senator. Judges are part of our system of democracy. Democracy is not as simple as majority rule. Judges have always served something of a
You would have it be as simple as majority rule. When you get
From the opening half minute, Senator Josh Hawley makes his strategy unmistakable. He immediately reframes the discussion. This isn't about the rulings. It's about the remedies. That's a calculated move. Instead of debating why lawsuits were filed against President Trump, he narrows the focus to how judges are responding, specifically the use of sweeping nationwide injunctions. By doing that, he reduces the battlefield to a single issue. Should one federal judge be able to halt a policy for the entire country, including people who aren't even before the court? It's a tight, disciplined line of attack. Professor Shaw counters by broadening the scope. She invokes Marbury versus Madison, the foundational Supreme Court case establishing judicial review, to argue that courts affecting non-parties isn't new. Her point: this kind of judicial impact has long been part of American constitutional practice. Hawley doesn't let the conversation drift. He pulls it back to his central concern and presses her directly. Are you not worried about this? Then comes the turning point. He cites her previous comments criticizing an injunction against the Biden administration as a travesty and a threat to democratic principles. Now the debate shifts from theory to consistency. His accusation is clear. When an injunction blocks your preferred administration, it's dangerous. When it blocks mine, it's routine. He frames that as hypocrisy. Shaw attempts to draw a distinction, saying her earlier criticism was specific to a particular judge and context. Hawley challenges that as insufficient, arguing that a legal principle should apply consistently, regardless of which president or judge is involved. He keeps demanding a neutral standard. Then comes a moment that reshapes the exchange. Shaw acknowledges that her view of the underlying legal issues may influence how she sees the remedy. In the high-stakes environment of a political hearing, that admission gives Hawley an opening. He interprets it as confirmation that ideology shapes legal judgment, precisely the concern he's been pressing. He reinforces his case visually, referencing data showing a spike in nationwide injunctions during the Trump administration. His argument: the tool was used aggressively against Trump and is now being defended in principle. Shaw's ultimate rebuttal shifts tone. She suggests that one possible explanation for the surge in injunctions is that Trump engaged in more legally questionable actions than other presidents. In other words, the difference isn't the tool, it's the conduct. From Hawley's perspective, that answer reinforces his narrative that politics, not neutral principles, are driving the debate. He closes by warning that the legal system cannot function if remedies are applied based on partisan alignment. And in the final exchange, he reiterates her prior statement about the Biden-era injunction, landing his core message on consistency before time runs out. So what unfolded? A senator with a focused strategy: narrow the issue, present prior statements, argue inconsistency. And a legal scholar defending broader judicial authority while arguing that context, including presidential conduct, matters. No matter where you stand politically, it was a tightly structured clash over legal theory, institutional power, and perceived double standards. The central question remains: should nationwide injunctions be limited by rule or evaluated case by case?
He's saying, when it happens to your guy, it's a travesty. When it happens to my guy, you say it's just business as usual? So how does she defend this? This is where it gets really shaky for her. She tries to make a distinction. She says her travesty comment was about a specific judge, Judge Kaczmarek, in a single-judge division. Hawley immediately pounces on this. He calls it personal. He says that's not a principle. And he's right. A legal principle shouldn't depend on which judge issues the ruling or where their office is. He keeps demanding a principle, a single consistent rule for all presidents. He's arguing that her distinction isn't a principle at all. It's just a political excuse to have it both ways. And then she makes a fascinating admission. She says, I think I am self-aware enough to know that my view of the underlying legal question, I am sure, colors my perception of the remedy. In a political fight, this is a fatal concession. Hawley's practically hearing her say, yes, my personal politics do determine my legal opinion. He seizes on it immediately. Then why shouldn't we stop them for everybody? This is the logical, consistent position he's been pushing for. He brings out a chart, which I'm assuming shows a massive spike in these injunctions against Trump, to visually make his case. Look, they used this weapon against Trump, and now they want to protect it for Biden. And what is Professor Shaw's ultimate rebuttal to all of this? This is the killer. She says, a very plausible explanation, Senator, you have to consider, is that he has engaged in much more lawless activity than other presidents. Think about that. He asked for a legal principle. She gave him a political talking point. From Hawley's perspective, she just proved his entire case for him. He's arguing that this is all just politics, and her only defense is Orange Man bad. It's not a legal argument. It's a cable news segment. The rest of the exchange is just Hawley's victory lap. He delivers his closing argument saying the system cannot survive if it's going to be politics all the way down. He's framing himself as the only one in the room fighting for a neutral, consistent rule of law. And when she tries to get one last word in, he just hits her with her own quote again. That is not what you thought when Joe Biden was president. Boom. He gets the last word. His core message of hypocrisy is the one that lands right before the chairman has to cut them off. So, what did we just see? We saw a senator who came prepared with a single devastating question and a gotcha quote to back it up. And we saw a legal scholar who, when confronted with her own words, couldn't provide a consistent neutral principle. She fell back on distinctions that sounded political and in the end just fell back on Trump was lawless. Regardless of your politics, just on the merits of the debate, Hawley had a strategy, he executed it, and he exposed a massive double standard. This is the kind of accountability we need to see more of. What do you think? Who won this exchange? Let me know in the comments below.